So welcome to our next session, which is a panel discussion. We have some interesting guests today to shine some light on the topic, which is how to turn your website into a strategic asset. We have two people on link. Welcome, Zane and Paul. How are you guys today?
Doing great. How are you?
Very good, thank you. We also have a studio guest in André Hegge.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm feeling great, thank you.
Perfect. We're going to start out with, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself briefly. Let's start with you, Zane.
Hi, my name is Zane Burnett. I am the Chief Digital Officer for Willis Allen Real Estate. It is a luxury boutique firm in the San Diego County area.
Okay, cool. And Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Morgan. I'm a PropTech consultant at Conf.com. Before that, I was IT director for 15 years at one of the UK top 20 estate agencies.
You're both very welcome. And Andrea, you are the CEO of Adfenix. Is that right?
Emma. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background as well?
So my background is basically that I did start Adfenix in my kitchen in 2015, and since then I've been looking after the growth of the business, from me alone in my kitchen to now 70 plus people across the world.
Fantastic. Could you start out this discussion by explaining to us, what is a website that is a strategic asset?
It's a good question, because I think the point of the topic is that there's always this long-term versus short-term in the real estate industry, where all the KPIs and everyone's driver is towards the next listing, the next transaction. That's what all the agents are pulling towards. But there's always an opportunity to think a bit more long-term, because the next transaction does not actually help you long-term. And that's where the website comes in. The website is one of the actual few tools that real estate agents have, where they can make sure that for every transaction that they complete, they're actually building something that gains an advantage in the future. So a strategic asset is simply something that gives you an advantage in the future. So to be very specific, a website that is not a strategic asset sits there as a shop window, doesn't actually gain in value over time, but a website that is a strategic asset has recurring visitors that come back to the website. It is a website that continuously improves its ability to capture leads and conversion and improves their conversion points. And it's also a website that captures as many data points as possible over time and feeds it into the CRM. So the CRM has more data, more actionable data over time. And that simply means that you have one agency that thinks short-term, runs after the next listing and transaction. They will perhaps be successful the next week, but they will struggle in 3 years' time. And then you have an agency that is building that asset that will, over time, just have a stronger and stronger competitive advantage. And that's what I think about when I think about the website as a strategic asset.
Thank you. There's a lot of nodding going on while you're speaking. But Paul, what's your experience with this long versus short-term perspective?
Yeah, sure. So where I used to work, we were able to turn our website into a strategic asset. In particular, what we were able to do was identify the people who are visiting our site through various forms of tracking and identify where they are in their customer journey using the integration in the website and the CRM. What that allowed us to do was things like track competitors' stock. And if we knew that a competitor wasn't selling a property quick enough, we'd know the name of that people, we'd know the email address, because they'd visited our website and done something on the website maybe 12 months ago, which enabled us to then go forward and try and win that bit of business. So by tying all the threads together, the different touch points on the website, social media, we're able to make lots of ways to reach out to people and win competitive business. And over a 5-year period, we grew our market share from 10% market share in the whole Northwest to 14%. So effectively nearly increased the size of our business by 50%.
And can I then follow up with saying, have you been able to turn your website into a strategic asset in this sense?
Yeah, I think that part of the process, and to Andre's point, yes, but it's an ever evolving process. You're constantly having to make tweaks. You're constantly having to pivot. You're constantly having to reevaluate. And so in that sense, the idea that a website is a strategic asset also has to be taken alongside the idea that it's a living, breathing, constantly evolving and growing type of thing. And so the work will never be done. And it constantly requires effort, maintenance, and decision making.
And what
That is a really good point, because I've seen so many website projects get kickstarted by having a budget for the year. We scope it out. It looks awesome. It has new colors and everything on it. You spend a year trying to launch it. That often turns into 18 months. And then you launch it, and then the budget is done. And it doesn't actually accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. And the key part is, of course, that the website is simply the sort of the framework that you can start to iterate around. The best websites, they are built in such a way that you can add the tracking mechanism, you launch a new advertising program, it feeds into the CRM, and you continue to evolve with it. So you highlight the key point that most website projects that fails to actually accomplish. Just make sure that it's a project that is maintained over time.
Yeah, but I have a follow-up question first for you, Zane. Would you say that it needs to constantly evolve, but is it due to the massive shifts and very quick shifts in the media landscape that makes you have to change it all the time? I mean, like social media and how social media is constantly changing traffic from maybe new social platforms and digital platforms. Is that a factor?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's one of the factors, certainly. We are beholden to the policies and guidelines of various technologies that allow us to gather that data. That's one thing that changes. One thing that always changes, perhaps at a slower clip, is consumer behavior. Part of what you need to do to create or turn your website into a strategic asset is to make sure that the consumers who are going there remain engaged. And so, alongside just various factors in the media or technology landscape that have to be taken into account, what actions you take as a content provider also have to constantly change because the consumers are constantly changing. So there are various factors at play that require constant monitoring.
Yeah, the consumer behavior, that I think this is a very good point. But could you again just say something very specific now, Andrea, about how to avoid the mistake that you just described?
I think it's about simply, it's almost like a budgeting exercise. You have the implementation cost, but if you really need to resource the maintenance to make sure that you can evolve with it. And I think one of the reasons that happens is that like perfection is the enemy of good. Like there's no design that is perfect, and you need to assume that from the beginning. We have in our team done sort of best practice analysis across hundreds of websites. There are a ton of good stuff across all websites, but there is no website that is good across the board. And that's just how it is. If you try to make it perfect from the beginning, that 12-month project will turn into a 36-month project and still won't be perfect.
Yeah, no, that's true. What are your thoughts on the budget for this type of project, Paul? Does it require a big investment?
I think a website, its ability to deliver business for you does depend on how much time and money you put into it. Partnering with a good website provider, having your own development team, depending on the size of your organization, does make a big difference, and particularly the ability to do those funky things like tying it with CRM, tying it with Adfenix, all that kind of stuff. I think for small agencies watching this, I would, focus having a good small partner, integration partner to come up with some good social media adverts that go beyond what Adfenix did. I think if you were a big organization, you'd be constantly developing and constantly integrating it like we were.
What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, to be honest, I have never been inside of a successful website project. I'm more about sort of observed the mistakes and successes from afar.
That sounds like good for your good night's sleep.
Yes, so most of my observations are that our customers promise that the website will be launched in March, and in May we wonder where the website is, and they say it will be launched in September, and then we go around that circle quite a lot. And then we have the sort of the data perspective. So we look at how does the website traffic numbers look like before and after, how does the lead generation look before and after, and somehow many agents expect it to just shoot through the roof when you update the website. More often it just should go through the floor. Doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing, but it does require that iteration on the back of launching it.
Can I ask you, Zane, could you describe some of the mistakes that you made during, because I'm assuming since you need to evolve all the time, that there are some mistakes that you've learned from during this process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's some mistakes that I continue to see observed amongst my peers and colleagues that are worth mentioning as well. A perfect example of this would be, at least in the States, common convention or common knowledge says, and if you look at, this is a made up number, but if you look at 95% of real estate sites, and you land on their homepage, what do you see? You see a big picture, a hero image above the fold, and then there's a white search bar overlaid on top of that image. Conventional wisdom says that that's what everybody is going to your site for, right? To search for properties. Well, about a year and a half ago, I was able to get some analytics on some of my friends' companies who run their website. And shockingly, we found that less than 0.5% of visitors who even land on the homepage are doing anything in that search bar. So right there is a perfect example of when you take a look at search traffic that's being led to your homepage, you find that the biggest conversion goal that you have isn't something that's actually converting. And so you have two options. One, do you try and force that conversion? Or two, do you analyze behavior to understand why that's happening? And in this specific example, the reason this was happening was when you take a step further and you analyze the search traffic, you find that the overwhelming majority of homepage search traffic, at least in the websites that I was looking at, are a result of brand-related searches, right? So the brokerage brand, and then their market, or an agent from that brokerage and then the market. Very, very little traffic coming organically to the homepage was a result of 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom house, or 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses in, blank. The overwhelming majority was brand related. And so what that shows you is that people who are landing on your homepage organically and you're capturing that traffic aren't coming to search for homes. They're coming to learn about you, or your agent or your brand. And so a perfect example of how to accommodate for that is to then adjust your strategy. To be able to solve that need. And so that's one example that I see a lot of, that I think is in not all cases, but in many, a common mistake. And that's starting at home base, the homepage.
I think a lot of these problems that you describe are not, that's not only for real estate. The problem with, like you said, with, developing a website for too long without releasing it. And then when you release it, you realize that people's behavior is not, you don't support that behavior, but you support yourself. But could we also discuss, because I can also, I'm thinking that there would be other strategic assets, like digital strategic assets that can support your website. Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And also just pick up on Zane's last point. I totally agree with him. I think the majority of people looking for property will go to a property portal and search for property there. The people looking to find out about an agent who are thinking of listing with that real estate agent will go to the agent's website and find out information about that agent, and the choose me button needs to be front and center. In terms of the assets that go around a website, the common areas are things like landing pages, social media adverts. I think the website needs to be pulling people in with the landing pages and giving them content or to collect data where you're allowed under GDPR and things like that. And equally, ought to be creating buckets for social media adverts. So, Facebook audiences, Twitter audiences, Instagram audiences, so that you can work out where somebody is in that customer journey and advertise them accordingly.
I do have a point. I had some time to think now that Paul was speaking, and an actually hugely important asset that I'm not sure if people are thinking about is that, especially for franchise, but also in the US, if you have a network of offices and agents tied to your brand and they are digitally educated, it's actually a huge asset because they are the ones that invest money in your brand and that invest money in generating traffic to your website. So we could probably look at a lot of the agents out there and we would be able to put them in different buckets. And now I'm talking franchise or sort of the agent model, where the ones that have really educated agents, they simply get so much for free because the agents are investing their money and their marketing budget in building the central brand and in driving traffic and leads through the website. And then other ones don't have sort of educated agents and they don't get any of that advantages. So I actually think that's one important asset that when I put my Adfenix hat on is part of what we contribute.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I want to force all of you to kind of given these reflections, to give an advice to people who hasn't succeeded in this work yet. And I mean, what would be your key advice to someone who needs to do something about their website?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, do that, please.
Yeah.
He needs to think this one.
Yeah. We'll give him time. And I'll actually piggyback off of him because I think the single most common mistake is a very fundamental one, which is the tendency to overbake or overcook or stew on the actual launch of a website. It's very easy to get stuck in, what we like to call analysis paralysis. There's a reason why there's a mantra in Silicon Valley and elsewhere that simply says, go fast. If you go fast, you can pivot, you can take the energy that you have and that you've set aside for this project, and you can attack the process of constantly evolving and making changes as needed. Now, that's not to say, throw out a horrendous website. That's to say, take the time to define what you want and put it out there, and then make the changes as they're needed or as you evolve along the process. Don't take forever to get your new initiative launched.
Yeah, I think that's a really good advice. And Paul, you have to come up with a different advice now. You can't say the same thing.
Yeah, sure. So I think of your number one outcome, so probably win valuations. And then from there, think of creative ways to do it. So can you track people? Can you track phone numbers? Can you publish a phone number on the website and have, if somebody rings it, then you know that phone call has come from that person, another phone number shared to somebody else. Think of creative ways of identifying the people who are on your website, because having that information allows you to do so much, allows you to chase down your competitors, win business, it allows you to identify when people like to put the home on the market and advertise to them. Data's king here, and the website's the key to getting the data.
I can't help but thinking that you also need to be very, very good at tracking what is actually working. Is that something isn't that like a key factor here? Or is that such a, hygiene factor that you don't mention it?
No, and I think that's a spectrum. I don't think anyone is perfect. But I do think that, Paul, your point is probably my favorite point, because put my Adfenix hat on again, there's so much value in the traffic that are further up the funnel that are not sort of signing up for a valuation tomorrow. And so many agents out there are just throwing away any traffic that is not signing up for a valuation tomorrow. But with the right kind of tracking, with the right kind of identification on the website earlier up in the funnel, suddenly you unlock this huge value of homeowners that visits the website that are there, and that you start to build that tracking mechanism, build it into the sales process. So I was about to come up with my own advice, but I liked Paul so much. I'm just going to emphasize that
Paul.
point.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just going to emphasize that point instead.
Okay, I want to thank you so much. I think you made some valuable points here, and I'm sure that people actually can use this advice, because I like this whole speeding up the process and not overbuilding and overthinking, but just test it and let it evolve over time. I think this is very valuable. So thank you all for this and for your time.